Welcome back to Stan and welcome back to S&C Coaches React to an Athlete Training. This is one a lot of people have been asking for swimmers for a while over the last few months, and we've got someone here, Adam Peaty. We got a pretty good video of him training. He is a 2-time Olympic champion, 8-time world champion, 16-time European champion, and a 3-time Commonwealth champion. So in terms of quality of athlete in the video, I think pretty average, I would say.
I'd say he's above average.
Well, I'd probably say bang on average in terms of achievements.
In terms of highly elite swimmers, he's average among that group, I'd say.
Yeah, I'd say I'd
say he's doing pretty well for himself.
Barely passable as an athlete that we should be reacting to, I would say.
What is he, 27?
He's an OBE, so he's
OBE.
Order of
Is that like Sir?
Order of the British Empire. The most excellent order of the British Empire. Oh, that's so British. Any British people watching this, you should be ashamed. That's just so... Yeah, that's when you call you Sir. Okay. You're like Sir Roger.
So it's Sir Peaty.
Sir
Adam Peaty.
Sir, what's that singer? One of those singers has it. A few of them has it. Bono surely didn't. Of course he did. Of course Bono took it. Did. Yeah, absolutely.
It's not a huge amount of video out there of S&C for swimmers.
No.
To be honest with you. And this one has some little gems in it.
So this is Adam Peaty prepares for a race. So there's actually some of the stuff we want to listen to. Alright, so first up we've got dumbbell rows, which is a great start to a video.
Great start, yeah.
Because it's Dara's favourite exercise of all time for any athlete ever. But in terms of for swimming, upper body strength is massively important. What percentage of propulsion does it account for again?
So upper body, depending on what paper you read, it's between 80 and 92% of propulsion, and obviously that varies across the strokes, comes from your upper body in swimming.
And obviously your lats are hugely involved in internally rotating your shoulders and pulling it back down here. So he's the breaststroke. It's heavily involved in all the upper body pulling motions, any vertical arms above your head and pulling them down. Lats are massively important, so that is... having a strong upper back is an understatement for swimming, for sure. So I think this is great to see.
We kind of tend to think in the winter that we get a lot more out of bulking. Probably rest around 94 kilogram all winter. And then I'll race at about 88. So that drop is, huge. You kind of starve yourself to get to that point, but at the same time, it's a very clever starvation program.
So that's a very common tactic and a very smart tactic, and it makes a lot of sense for our athletes to gain some weight in the off season. Some of the reasons they might be doing that is gaining back weight that they lost from a long in season. So a lot of times in seasons can be quite detrimental. I know, for example, is it the NBA play something like 50 games, or the NFL play like 50 games a season or something crazy like that? So you're going to lose a shitload of muscle mass, tendon degradation, psychological stress, CNS stress, fatigue. All of these kind of build up. All of these like creeping fatigue accrue over that time. And if you're in a place where you're in a calorie kind of neutral diet or a calorie deficit, even in some of these cases, because they're doing so much exercise, it's hard for them to maintain that weight, or you're trying to force yourself to stay at your race weight in this case, or sport specific weight, it could be quite very, very stressful on the body. So getting that weight up in the on season or in the off season is very, very important to let you recover properly, build back some of that muscle mass you probably lost.
I think it's particularly true in the case of swimming. So swimming across almost all of its disciplines is frightfully high volume. You probably won't see that kind of training volume in any other sport, no matter where you go to, no matter what level of that sport you go to. Kind of ultra marathon runners are probably the only other people who are covering these same kinds of training volumes over the course of every week. So as Garth said, this off season is the time when you're not going to be able to put on a kilo or two of lean muscle tissue if you're doing 14 pool sessions a week. It's probably just not going to be possible under most circumstances. Whereas now in the off season, doing nice heavy squats and stuff like that, it is a bit more achievable or conceivable that you could put on some muscle tissue or put that tissue back on.
So obviously then as well in the off season, I let you make the most of your S&C work. So the more body weight you gain, the more muscle mass you're likely to gain, especially if you're a professional athlete. You're obviously doing everything to gain as much lean mass as possible, so you can get more strength in, you can get more conditioning in. Now, it's certainly worse for your conditioning, but that's okay when you're not in race season. That's totally okay. It's okay to accept that you're going to lose a little bit of power to weight ratio, you're going to lose a little bit of your conditioning, but you shouldn't be looking to get your conditioning in the off season like that. You're really looking for a lot of strength training and muscle mass accrual and recovery from the in-season. So that extra body weight really lets you do all of that and a lot better, because you've got a calorie surplus, more macronutrients, more micronutrients, just more calories in general, and just feeling a lot better. Sleep will probably be a lot better, probably more drugs and stuff.
If you look at what will define a swimmer as being able to swim faster, there's a number of things. So the first thing you have is like the technical aspect of swimming, which obviously is an in-season thing that you'd mostly develop. You then have your work capacity, so how many strokes you can do or how long you can keep up this highly efficient stroke. And then the last one will be actual just maximal strength and power outputs. The maximal strength and power outputs, if you break that down to all the other stuff is going to get improved in season, your real high-end outputs in terms of strength and power and things like that are only going to come about, especially for an athlete at this level, by gaining a few extra kilos of muscle tissue. It's very, very likely that he's eking out the top ends of like the strength potential within the muscle tissue he has right now, and this small or incremental gain in muscle tissue will actually be very valuable to him in terms of those outputs in the pool and in terms of improving speed, power out of the blocks, all those things.
Like literally the difference between him gaining 100 extra grams of muscle each in-season, so by the time he gets from his off-season weight down to his in-season weight, if he's even like 88.1 the next season, he's got 100 extra grams of contractile tissue. You know, that's a huge advantage. Even if he loses that halfway through the season, that's still him 100 grams extra above where he was last season, and potentially, theoretically, that could be more beneficial and more productive every season. So we're moving on to back squats.
A lot has changed since Rio. In myself, in appearance-wise, I've grown into a boy to a man, I think. So it's all about what's that next step to make me even faster.
Some next squat.
What I squatted before Rio, I think it was 110. I'm squatting 150 now, and I could.
So he's went from very close to a double body weight squat. So obviously there's a couple of reasons a swimmer would want lower body strength, most notably power production, of course, which we touched on in a previous video. So the swimmer's force velocity curve. Obviously that's hugely important. So starting after the blocks, and leg strength, high bar back squat like this, massively important. Postural strength in the water would be very, very important and is very, very useful and something you can get a lot from high bar back squats. Any comment on the numbers?
I think those numbers, there's definitely something to be learned from here, right? So obviously he's talking about Rio being an Olympic level athlete and doing quite well at the Olympics and having a very low squat. Like by most standards, you're talking about, 1.2 times body weight for the back squat. Now he's getting up closer to double body weight, which is closer to kind of what we'd see most people wanting as a prerequisite for an elite level athlete, even when it's not in a high power sport or a kind of leg based sport. So it is interesting to see that that's the direction they're pushing. You know, we'll always quote double bodyweight back squats. If people want to do plyometric training, we'll talk about prerequisites of strength before people need to focus on other things in their sport. And this is the kind of true or real life realization of this, where obviously the S&C team have had a look at it, they've spotted a weakness, and now they're pushing towards that double bodyweight squat.
Yeah.
Go further, but then you get to the question, is it worth the injury if you get injured? If we go to 160, are we kind of going up to injury territory, or do we stay at 150, get more power out of it? So there's a lot of calculations that the team do.
So that's a great point, and it's kind of like your diminishing returns in terms of your S&C work. Like, how strong do you need to be before getting more strength isn't productive in terms of injury risk, time spent away from your sports, amount of time in the gym just doing extra stuff when it's probably not that interesting for the athlete. So there's a lot of stuff where you get beyond a certain amount of S&C capacity, where then you just maintain it for the rest of your career, as opposed to increasing. Is increasing always better? That's always kind of a case you need to be made case by case basis, like they're talking about here. And obviously if he's multiple time world champion, defending Olympic champion. They probably got it right.
Yeah.
Or they certainly didn't get it wrong anyway.
No. The other interesting thing, this is the second part of that sentence where he talks about the weight staying the same but getting more power out of it. So what they're more than likely referring to there is a real focus on velocity. So power is like the rate at which you're able to do work. So obviously the work is staying the same. If that's 150 kilos, it's staying at 150 kilos. But the rate at which he's moving 100 kilos is increasing. So they're probably using some sort of dynamometer or some sort of linear transducer on the bar to just make sure that instead of pushing his weight up, he's staying at the same kind of weights, but the speed the bar is moving at is increasing.
Obviously I work with them.
His body has the potential, if he did too much weights, he would just literally, it would not be okay.
I'm just getting my glasses there now. I don't even wear. I call this a faux pas. A faux pas.
I don't know what the fuck I'd call it.
His body has the potential, if he did too much weights, he would just literally, it would not be okay.
So an elite athlete, we don't even need to say anything. I think that's it. Like, that's funny enough in itself. I think that's just a weird circumstance where an elite athlete being too much and get too muscly. It'd be interesting for Olympic sport, Olympic champion, multiple world champion. It'd be so strange.
Like getting too jacked.
Yeah, he's getting too much muscle.
It's crazy.
Because we know that happens to everyone,
It's crazy.
Anyway, let's move on. Great exercise.
And we know what numbers.
Also, these are quite high as well. So this looks like 24 to 50 kilos.
Yeah.
That's very good. That's very impressive. Phenomenally useful, like we talked about the lats. That's great.
Yeah, absolutely.
We need to get to, and I think that exact science has been.
So I like these. People might have differing opinions on the use of non-isometric work in the midline. I think particularly for an athlete of this level, right? So what he's doing here is that would be lateral abduction. He's basically building up those muscles at the side of his hips. He's building up his midline in general here to be able to maintain a certain posture. Now, if you were somebody who works in a single linear plane, right? So if you're a 100-meter sprinter, a 60-meter dasher, if you're a weightlifter, a number of sports where you're kind of just working in one plane, and that's your main focus, then that won't be as much a focus of your training as somebody like a swimmer, right? Swimming is really, really unique in the fact that every degree his legs drop down in the water, he has more drag, right? So the important thing for drag is our kind of cross-sectional area as we go through the water. If I'm being very, very efficient, the total cross-sectional area of my drag as I go through the water will be my head in the middle and then my two shoulders. If you imagine every degree my feet drop into the water after that, I become less efficient to move through the water. There's more drag coming from my legs rubbing against the water. So being able to keep yourself upright, being able to keep both of your legs directly behind your torso and being able to ensure they're not going from side to side is very, very beneficial. And that's probably why you're seeing a higher level of kind of focus being put into the midline work here.
We've got a formula with that, and I think we'll just kind of refine that and trip.
Now, this is another example of an exercise such as this. So obviously it's extension of the hips. We commonly see extension of the hip movements. This, RDL, stiff-legged deadlifts, all of these kinds of things. Is it possible that there could be a better exercise selection in this case? Certainly. I think there probably can. We're just seeing one day of a gym program. He could be doing really heavy, nice RDLs every other day of the week, or he could be doing appropriately weighted good mornings every other day of the week. And it just so happens that this time he's doing a glute bridge where he's probably not in the correct position, and he probably could improve the output of this glute bridge, but we don't know.
That and try and make it better each time.
I mean, I don't tend to eat meat when I'm in taper, so
Just take notice of that he said he doesn't eat meat when he's taper. So he's not a vegan or vegetarian, he does eat meat.
it's kind of keeping that fat down on those unnecessary stuff that I don't need in my body. I'll strip, and then I'll probably, from 6 till 6, I'll have a 12-hour fast. So yeah, it's kind of getting into that phase where your body's burning those fats after 6 hours.
Mm-hmm. Probably just won't get into that.
BCAAs, stuff like that is hugely important for me, because especially when we're on the go and we're at the pool most of the day, we're trying to find those protein hits, and as I don't eat meat, it's a little bit harder to kind of get that hit, and it's just
So he's saying he doesn't eat meat when he's in race pace or race season and he's doing a lot of training, but he does eat meat in his off season. So now, normally we stay away from nutrition stuff and make a point of it, of not ever really talking about nutrition stuff unless someone specifically asks us. But on our videos, we never talk about that. But I hope you could kind of see that doesn't make a huge amount of sense. So removing a very valuable protein source from your diet and replacing it with BCAAs and protein powders, you're missing out on like the cholesterol available to you, creatinine, taurine, choline, iron, any number of readily available, very important micronutrients in your diet. And he's saying it's very hard to get that amount of protein. So why would you move one of your most valuable protein, the most valuable protein source in your diet? I don't get. I'm very open to individual differences here. Maybe he feels terrible for some reason when he eats meat and he's racing, but that doesn't make sense.
One thing I will say here, and this is something that you might have started to notice, or you'll certainly notice when you listen to some elite athletes talking, is that there's a lot of dysfunctional dietary habits, or there's a lot of dysfunctional dietary protocols go on a lot of the time. So you'll hear 12-hour fasting, you'll hear about complete occlusion in the case of this, you'll hear about over-reliance on certain supplements. It's really important to note that what elite athletes do and what elite athletes find to be successful are certainly not always the best thing for your health, but are probably not always the best thing for your performance either, you know. And it's just happens to be the case a lot of the time. It's in spite of certain protocols, not because of.
And I'm not saying Adam is, but I'm just saying also in spite of other protocols and because of certain other protocols, if you were doing those, you get away with some nutritional stuff.
just all about fine tuning, like a race car. You know, you look at your engine, you look at the computer, and you're trying to fine tune to get those extra performance benefits, and that's something we always do.
So I think that's some great S&C. I'd be interested to see what his plyometric training looks like. I'm almost certain he does some. Loughborough University is pretty good rep for S&C work, so I'd be very interested to see what he's doing for plyometric stuff, but there isn't. If there's any other athletes you'd like us to react to, then leave them in the comments. If there's any other swimmers you want us to have a look at, we definitely have a look at those as well. Thanks for watching. Anything outfits?
Just the double finger guns.
Pew pew pew. The favourite, the classic.
The classic.